Amy is in communications class, bored out of her mind. She stares out the window watching as people and cars go by. She can't wait for class to be over so she can go home and chill, but then she remembers she has homework from her other classes. She leaned back in her chair and looks up at the ceiling. College has only just started, but she already wants it to be over with. When the class was almost over, the professor said, "All right, everyone, we have a team class project." Amy rolled her eyes. She thought to herself, great, more work. The professor walked around and handed everyone a piece of paper. Amy started reading the handout. The scenario described a major PR crisis for Novatech Innovations, a high-value technology company, because the CEO's son had posted a controversial statement online, leading to boycotts and media demands. The project objective was for teams to collaboratively craft a formal public apology or press statement that ethically addressed the controversy, protected the company's reputation, and demonstrated strategic crisis communication. The deliverables included a written statement and a rationale report. Some students started walking off to their friends asking if they wanted to work with them, but then the professor says, "I have already assigned you teams already." He said it would be teams of 2. He started listing of names. All Amy could think is, "I hope he doesn't put me with anyone stupid or lazy." When the professor got to her, he said, "Amy, you will be working with Kenya." Amy started looking around and she spotted a woman across from her waving. Amy gets up and goes and sits next to her. The professor then says, "All right, class. You got your assignments, which is due next week. You're in your groups. Now you can all leave." Kenya say, "I can't believe he already gave us group assignments. The class just started." Amy laughs and says, "Yeah, I thought we would get at least a week or 2 before we get these type of assignments." Kenya said, "For real, girl, at least take us out to dinner first. Before you screw us." Both Kenya and Amy started laughing. Then Kenya said, "Well, I have to go here. Let me get your number, and we can schedule a time to meet up for this assignment." Amy took her phone and put her number in. Then Kenya says, "Perfect. We'll see you later, bye." Amy responds bye and turns around and walks to her car. 10 minutes later, Amy walks into her apartment. Her 7-year-old daughter then runs up, "Mommy?" Amy picks her up and says, "Hello, my little princess. How are you?" Rosen responds, "I'm doing good, Mommy." "I had such a good day at school." Amy says, "That's good. You can tell me all about it. Just let me get settled in first." Rose then says, "Okay." That's when Amy's boyfriend walked up. "Hey, baby," and gives her a hug and kiss. "How was your day?" Amy sighed and says, "Tiring. I have so much homework to do." Amy's boyfriend, who was named Isaiah, says, "Well, hopefully I can brighten up your day." Amy says, "Thank you, baby," and gives him a kiss and walks into the living room and sat down. Isaiah walks up to her and says, "Amy, I know I haven't been the best lately because I've been so caught up with work, but I promise I'll start spending more time with you." And Amy rolls her eyes. "You have said this before, Isaiah. You say you're going to spend more time with us. You do good for about a week or 2. Then you're right back to the same old thing." Isaiah says, "I know I have. And I'm sorry." He then sits down next to her. "But I promise you, baby, this time is different. I've already called my boss and lowered down my hours, and I won't be doing overtimes as much." Amy doesn't say anything, just looks at him. She then started taking off her shoes and says, "We'll see." Later on that night, Amy is on the couch finishing up the last of the homework she had to do right as she was about to go to bed. She got a text from Kenya, "Hey, I don't have work Wednesday. How that sounds for you?" Amy responded, "I have work that day. How about Thursday?" Kenya, "Yeah, that'll be great. See you then." Amy then says, "See you." Amy crawls into bed with her boyfriend and goes to sleep. On Thursday, around 3:00 p.m., Amy walked into the library. She saw Kenya was already sitting at a computer, and Amy walked up and sat down next to her. Amy dropped her bag beside the computer and smiled. "You've been here long?" "Just about 10 minutes, Kenya said, spinning slightly in her chair. "I already pulled up some examples of company apologies online. Girl, some of these are rough." Amy laughed. "All right, let's make sure ours doesn't sound fake." For the next few hours, they brainstormed, rewrote, and argued over tone, until finally, they had something that felt right and wrote it down. They came up with a statement from Novatech Innovations. Novatech addressed the deeply offensive comments made by the CEO's family member, unequivocally condemning them as unacceptable and against company values of inclusion and respect. They offered a sincere apology for the pain and broken trust. Novatech announced immediate action, including a comprehensive third-party review of internal codes and implementing mandatory company-wide cultural sensitivity training for all employees and leadership. They clarified the individual is not an employee. Novatech committed to learning from the situation and taking meaningful steps to rebuild trust. It took them about 3 hours to finish the whole thing. As they were leaving the library, Kenya says, "Man, I don't feel like going home right now and having to cook." Amy said, "Well, I don't know if you like South African food, but my dad owns a good spot just a few blocks away," Amy said. "Oh, your family's from South Africa?" Kenya asked. Amy proudly said, "Yes, we are." Kenya thought about it for a moment. "I've never tried South African food, but I'm always up for trying new things." Amy smiles and says, "Okay, cool, let's go." Amy's father's restaurant is called Gold Reef Kitchen. Amy and Kenya walk into the restaurant. Amy calls out, "Papa?" Amy's father pokes his head up from the counter and comes out, talking in Zulu. "Hey, baby girl, how are you doing?" and gives her a big hug. Amy then says, in Zulu, "I'm doing well, father." She grabs Kenya's hand and says, "My friend here wanted to try out some South African food. I had to take her to the best South African spot in the whole city." He then turns towards Kenya and says, in English, "Hello, young lady. You want to try out some good South African cuisine?" Kenya says, "Yeah. I've never had South African food before, and Amy was saying you're the best South African cook in the city." Amy's dad says, "Well, all right then. I'll cook something up just special for you two. Go sit down and I'll have something whipped right up." Kenya nods and says, "Thank you, sir." And Amy says, in Zulu, "Thank you, father." Amy and Kenya sit down near the front, watching as people and cars go by and just talking about their lives. Amy learns that Kenya was born and raised in Houston, Texas, but came to Louisville, Kentucky because her father had a business opportunity here. She also told her that when she was 16, she got pregnant with her son, and she also has a 2-year-old daughter. Amy then asked her how old she was, and she said, "I'm 22. Kenya then asked Amy how old she was. Amy told her she was 19. Amy then started telling her about her life, how she was born and raised in South Africa, and how when she was 13, a 16-year-old boy that lived down the street from her groomed her and got her pregnant, and she gave birth to their daughter shortly after. When she was going through a depression state, her current boyfriend Isaiah comforted her and consoled her and got her through the hard times, and eventually they started dating. She then started telling her how their relationship was great for years, but lately he's been working his dream job and it has been taking over most of his time, and he hasn't really been spending any of his free time with her or Rose. Kenya then puts her hand on Amy's and says, "I'm sorry that happened to you and your boyfriend. He will come around. Just give him time, girl." Amy's heart flutters at Kenya's touch. That's when her father walks up to them with a plate of food, and he sits it down next to them saying, "Dig in, you two." He then puts his hand on Kenya's shoulder and says, "Hope you enjoy it." Kenya says, "Thank you, sir." Then her and Amy start digging in. While they are eating, they are laughing and talking about experiences and interests and hobbies and just other random stuff. Amy sits there looking at Kenya. She was so charismatic and full of life. She seemed to just have this energy that pulls everyone in. Amy also started to notice that Kenya is very beautiful, light skin, short curly hair, and kind of skinny. She was enjoying talking to her so much that she was upset when they had to leave and go their separate ways home. Her daughter greeted her with a hug. Amy read her a bedtime story and sent her to bed. She tries to have some time with Isaiah, but he was too caught up in his work, so she just went in her room to go lay on her bed. As she was sitting down on her bed, a text came through. It was from Kenya saying, "I really enjoyed the food and our conversation today. We should go back sometime." Amy responded, "Yeah, for sure. I would love that." She then laid down on her bed, smiling ear to ear and giggling like a little girl, something she hasn't done since her and Isaiah started dating. For the first time since she started college, she was actually looking forward to going into class tomorrow. The next day, Amy walks into class. She looks around and she spots Kenya. She walks over to the table she's sitting at and sits down next to her. Kenya says, "Hey girl, how are you?" Amy responds, "I'm doing well. How about you?" Kenya says, "I'm doing okay, girl. A little tired though. My kids kept me up." Amy laughed. "I understand you. Sometimes my daughter doesn't want to go to sleep and she keeps me up all night." Kenya says, "Sometimes I want to tell them to shut the hell up and go to bed." Amy and Kenya both start laughing. That's when the professor tells everyone to settle down, and he's about to start class. At the end of class, as they are both walking out, Kenya says, "Hey, Amy, there's a concert being held downtown in 2 weeks. It's a mixture of R&B and soul. I think you would really enjoy it." Amy smiles and says, "Sure, I would love to go." Kenya gives a smile and says, "Awesome. It's at 5 p.m. See you then," and she turns to walk away. That's when Amy says, Hold on. Do you mind picking me up in your car? My car has been having a bit of trouble, and I don't want to drive it around too much. Kenia says, okay, I can do that. Amy says, great. Well, see you on Monday. And they give each other a hug. Amy could smell her hair. It smelled like roses, and her skin was soft like coconut oil. She almost didn't want to pull away. Kenia says, bye. Kenia turns and walks away. Amy smiles to herself and jumps up and down, so excited that 2 weeks couldn't come faster. Amy and Kenia started texting and calling each other almost daily. They would send funny memes, complain about homework, and send videos and pictures of their children. They met up to help each other on an assignment they had to do, but they ended up just talking most of the time. Meanwhile, with Isaiah, she was growing more and more distant. Whenever he would try to talk to her, she would dismiss him, or when she did talk to him, whenever she got a text, especially from Kenia, she would quickly end the conversation. She even stopped being intimate with him, stating she was too tired. Around 3:30 p.m., Amy was getting ready. She was wearing a white tank top and a white skirt that was short but not too short, and the outfit fitted her, showing off her curves. She was putting her hair into a ponytail when Isaiah walked into the bathroom. He said, hey baby, where are you going looking this good? Amy said, I'm just going out with my friend. Isaiah said, well, I don't have to work today. He then walked up behind Amy and put his hands on her waist and said, how about you stay home tonight, and me, you, and Rose can watch a movie? Amy then turned to him and put her arms around the back of his neck, and she says, as much as I would love to spend time with you and Rose, I can't. I already promised my friend I would go. I can't just back out now. She gave him a little peck on the cheek, then turned back towards the mirror. Isaiah then says, where are you going with your friend? Amy says, we're going to a concert. Isaiah then says, I love concerts. Let me go get ready. Amy then quickly says, no. Isaiah looked at her confused, and she quickly calmed down and says, look, I'm sorry for yelling, but this is kind of just a girl's thing. Isaiah said, you only been knowing this girl for 2 weeks, and you're already having just girls' night with her? Amy replied, I know you're frustrated, Isaiah, but I promise next time you're off, we will spend time together, and next time I will make sure that is more of an everyone's included kind of thing. Isaiah then rolls his eyes, knowing he can't convince her, and just says, okay. Amy then says, thank you, baby, and gives him a kiss. About an hour later, Kenia calls Amy, telling her she's outside of her apartment building. Amy comes out and heads towards her car. When she gets in, Kenia was dressed in a bit of a hippie outfit. Even though the outfit was simple, Amy thought she looked amazing. They greeted each other and drove to the concert. At the concert, Kenia and Amy were laughing, drinking, and enjoying the music. At one point in the night, Amy was dancing, swinging her hips side to side, just feeling the flow of the music in her body. Then suddenly she felt a hand grab her waist, and another hand grab her right hand. She turned and saw Kenia. Amy pressed her body up against hers, and they started dancing in unison. She then took her other hand and placed it on the back of Kenia's neck, staring at her in her eyes. Amy started moving more seductively, Kenia mimicking her movements. As they stared into each other's eyes, the outside world didn't exist anymore, and they were in their own little bubble. As they were staring at each other, Amy leaned in and gave Kenia a kiss. Amy, realizing what she did, immediately snapped out of it and stopped dancing and started apologizing profusely to Kenia. Kenia said, no, it's okay, then grabbed Amy's face, making Amy stop apologizing, and she kissed her back. They started making out a little bit. People around them started cheering and clapping, but they didn't notice as they were too caught up in each other's embrace. Once they finally broke away, Kenia asked, do you want to get out of here? Amy, still catching her breath, just gave a nod. Kenia grabbed her hand, and they walked out of the concert and back to her car. When Amy and Kenia got to Kenia's house, they instantly went to her bedroom, and they started right back to where they left off. At first, they were just making out, but then clothes started to come off. Kenia started kissing down her body when Amy stopped her and told her she's never done this before with a woman. Kenia went back up to her face and gave her a kiss on the lips and said, we don't have to if you don't want to. Amy quickly said, no, I want to. I want you. Kenia kissed her on her lips again and said, tell me to stop if it ever becomes uncomfortable. Amy shook her head, and Kenia went down. 2 hours later, Amy was out of breath, and her hair was a mess. Kenia was staring at Amy with a smile on her face. Amy then says, how do you do that thing with your tongue? Kenia chuckled and said, well, let's just say I have a lot of practice. Amy just turns and looks at the ceiling. I've never felt that way before. Not even with Isaiah. Or with the father of my daughter. Kenya says, are you okay? Amy says, yeah, I'm just in shock. Kenya then says, I'm glad I was the first to give you that experience. Then gives her a kiss on her cheek and lays her head on Amy's shoulder. Amy then looks at her and kisses her forehead. Soon after, they fall asleep. At 6 a.m. in the morning, Kenya dropped off Amy at her apartment. When she walked in, Isaiah was in a jacket and sweatpants, about to head out. When he saw Amy, he ran to her and gave her a big hug. He said, where were you last night? I was calling, and you never answered. Amy dismissively says, oh, I was just at my friend's house. We got too drunk, and neither one of us was able to drive all the way to our house, so we just stopped at hers, and I spent the night over there. Isaiah said, you know you could have called me or texted me to let me know you were safe. Amy then turns to him and says, I'm sorry, baby, then gives him a kiss on the cheek. Amy then crawled into bed and went to sleep. Later on the next day, Kenya texted Amy saying, hey, how are you doing? Amy didn't respond. She really didn't know how she felt about the situation. She has never been attracted to women before, so why such a strong attraction now? And now she just had sex with a woman, and she liked it. She thought to herself, does this make me a lesbian now? In school, Amy avoided Kenya. After weeks of not talking to her, Amy then texted Kenya saying, hey, after class tomorrow can we talk? Not even a whole minute later, Kenya responded saying, sure. After class, Amy and Kenya go to a nearby park and walk around together for about 10 minutes. Neither one says anything, just walking around and looking at the scenery. Amy doesn't know how to start off the conversation. Kenya then says, so did you come here to talk, or are we gonna just keep walking around this park in silence? Amy responds, no, I invited you out here to talk. I just don't know what to say. Kenya says, well, you can start off by telling me why you haven't been talking to me these last few weeks. Amy replied, it's just I needed time to think. I've never felt this way about another woman, and I'm just so confused. And Isaiah, Rose, my father, what would they think? How do I tell them that I have such strong feelings for another woman? Kenya grabs her hand and says, don't worry about what nobody else thinks. Do what makes you happy. You don't owe Isaiah, Rose, or your father any explanation. Amy thought about it for a moment and said, yeah, I guess you're right. Kenya says, now, if you want to focus on figuring things out, I'll leave you alone and give you your space. Amy then quickly says, no, I want to talk to you. I've never felt this way before, and I would like to explore this new feeling. Kenya says, okay, then let's explore. She then grabs Amy's face and gives her a kiss. Then she grabs her hand, and they turn to leave the park, and that is the start of their affair. Amy and Kenya started seeing each other once to twice a week, under the excuse of meeting up to study at the library, but they would really be at Kenya's apartment, sometimes sitting back and enjoying each other's company or exploring each other's bodies. They would text each other every day, sending good morning and good night texts, talking about each other's day and about their children, and also sending explicit videos and pictures to each other. Meanwhile, Amy starts to pull away from Isaiah. She snapped at and ignored him, starting to barely show him any affection. When he would try to talk to her, she would just brush him off. Whenever he would try to plan for them to go out and do something together, she would tell him that she was busy, using the excuse that she has homework. At first, Isaiah tried to ignore all the signs, just thinking she was going through a lot because of school and work. But now spring break has started, and Amy knew she couldn't use the same excuse anymore, and she would soon have to tell Isaiah what's going on. One day in the morning, Amy had just dropped Rose off at school for her last day before spring break. Then she headed off to class herself. The whole time she was in class, she was barely listening to her professors and barely even spoke to her friends or Kenya, thinking about how she's going to tell Isaiah. Even though they have been fighting and having problems, she still cares for Isaiah and doesn't want to hurt his feelings. But at the same time, she knows she wants to be with Kenya. For the entire day, she just sits in her seat, thinking about what to say. As they were leaving class, Kenya stops Amy and says, girl, you okay? You barely spoke today. Amy says, I'm sorry. I just had a lot on my mind. Kenya says, do you want to talk about it? Amy then shook her head. No, not really. Kenya then grabs Amy's hand and says, come on. What's wrong? You know you could talk to me about anything, right? Amy says, I know, it's just something I have to handle by myself. Kenya shakes her head knowingly and says, okay, girl, but are you still coming over later? Amy then says, "Not today. I have something I need to sort out." Kenya says, "Well, okay. You handle your business and just text or call if you need anything, or if you ever want to come over." Amy says, "Okay." Kenya then pulls her in for a kiss and says, "Bye." Amy then waves back, "Bye." She then turns to her car and starts heading home. As Amy is entering the house, locking the door behind her, Isaiah is getting ready to leave. Amy asked him, "Where are you going?" He says, "I need to make a quick stop at the post office real quick. I want to drop off these letters to my family." He then says, "You don't have to worry about picking up Rose. I can go get her right after I leave the post office." He then gives her a kiss on the cheek and starts heading towards the door. Amy then says, "Isaiah." He stops and turns to her. Amy is about to tell him about Kenya and her affair, but decided against it and just says, "When you come home with Rose, we should all go to the arcade and hang out." Isaiah smiled and said, "I like that. We haven't hung out as a family for a while." Amy said, "Yeah." He then opened the door and walked out, closing it behind him. Amy then sat down on the couch, taking a deep breath in. She didn't know why, but she wanted to spend one more day with Isaiah and Rose as a family before it all comes crashing down. She then gets a text from Kenya, but she ignores it, saying, "Today is all about Isaiah and Rose." When Isaiah and Rose get home, Rose changes her clothes, and they all leave to go to the arcade. They have lots of fun after the arcade. They went to the movies and went to Amy's father's restaurant to eat. When they finally got home, it was around 10 p.m., and Rose was very tired from all the day's activities. Amy put Rose to bed, then went to bed herself. The next day, around 3 o'clock in the evening, Amy took Rose to her friend's house so she could spend the night. After dropping her off, while she was driving, she was thinking to herself, "Today is the day I have to tell him." Once she got home, she saw Isaiah sitting down on the couch watching a soccer game. Amy then said, "Isaiah, can we talk?" Isaiah looked at her and said, "Can it wait real quick, baby? My favorite team is playing." Amy then said, "No, it needs to be discussed right now." Isaiah then kind of annoyingly turned off the TV and said, "What's up, Amy?" Amy then takes a deep breath and sits down on the couch next to him. She then says, "I don't know how to tell you this." She then stops and starts to tear up a little bit. Isaiah, seeing that this is really serious and she's in a bit of emotional distress, puts his hand on hers and says, "What's wrong, Amy?" At first, she started to think that this was a bad idea and that she shouldn't tell him and just forget about the whole thing. And she was about to tell him to forget about it. Then got a text from Kenya. When she saw her name pop up on her phone, her resolve came back. She kind of tearfully turned towards Isaiah and said, "Isaiah, I can't do this anymore. Just haven't been the same between us for nearly 2 years. Barely talk or hang out anymore, and I'm over it." Isaiah then looks at her confused. "What do you mean? We had a great time yesterday. I thought we were trying to fix it." Amy then says, "No, Isaiah. I just wanted to have a good time with you and Rose before I broke things off." Isaiah then says, "No, you're not breaking things off. Why would you want to do that? We can fix this together. There's no need to break up." Amy then shakes her head and says, "No, Isaiah, it is. I'm sorry, but I have fallen in love with someone else." Isaiah's face then goes blank and then starts to think. Then a look of realization came upon his face. Then said, "It's that Kenya girl, isn't it, Amy?" Amy then said, "Yes." Isaiah then angrily says, "After everything, I was there for you when no one else was. I supported you when no one else did. I have done nothing but love and respect you. And you cheat on me?" Amy then says, with tears in her eyes, "Isaiah, you have been ignoring me and Rose for the last year. At that point, I have been trying to get your attention for a year. You always brush me off, saying that you have to complete a project. At first, I understood. It was your dream job and it was a lot of work. But then after a while, I just got tired of it, and we started living more like roommates than like a couple. Kenya came into my life and started showing me love and affection, something I've been desperately wanting from you." Isaiah then turns away and just stares at the wall. Neither one of them says anything for a few seconds. Then Isaiah says, "We can make it work." Amy then says, "Isaiah, no, we can't." Isaiah then grabs her by the shoulders and says, "Please don't do this to me, to us. Think about Rose. I've been the only father figure she has ever known her entire life. How do you think she will feel?" Amy then says, "I will let you visit her sometimes, But I can't stay with you no longer, Isaiah. Isaiah then lets Amy go and turns towards the door. He grabs his keys from off the nightstand. He then looks back at her with tears in his eyes. He says, I'll stay at a friend's house for tonight. I'll come back and get my stuff tomorrow. He then opens the door and walks out. Amy then breaks down and starts crying. She cries for nearly the entire day and just sits back in her thoughts. The next day, Isaiah and two of his friends go into the house and get all of Isaiah's stuff. As Isaiah was grabbing the last of his things, he then turned to Amy and said, I hope you and her work out. For your sake. He then shuts the door. After a few days, Amy then calls Kenya, asking if she could come over. Kenya says yes, and Amy sends Rose over her parents' house, then goes back to her apartment and waits on Kenya. Amy sits on the couch watching TV, waiting on her. After 5 minutes, there's a knock at the door. Amy gets up and opens it. Kenya said, Hi. I was beginning to think you were done with me. Amy then grabs her hand and pulls her into her apartment, shutting the door. She says, Of course not. I can never be done with you. Kenya says, Is that right? Amy then seductively says, Yeah. Kenya then says, So is that why you called me over? Amy then says, I can show you better than I can tell you. Then grabs her hand and leads her to her bedroom. An hour later, Kenya and Amy are laying on the bed. Kenya kisses Amy on the lips. Then they both just sit there for a couple of seconds. Kenya, noticing Amy's deep thought, says, Hey, you okay? Amy then tells her, Yeah, I'm okay. I just had something I want to tell you, but I don't know how to say it. Kenya says, Just say it. Amy then says, Me and Isaiah broke up last night. Kenya says, Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. What happened? Amy then says, You happened. Kenya, confused, saying, What do you mean? Amy says, Ever since I met you, every day has been amazing. I love the way you make me feel, mentally and physically. I just can't stop thinking about you. Kenya says, Amy, what are you? Amy then says, What I'm trying to say is, I love you, Kenya. Kenya, looking surprised, sits up in the bed. Amy grabs her arm and says, I know we only been talking for a few months, but you can't deny the chemistry we have together. We talk every day. We crave being around each other. We can't keep our hands off each other. We've been intimate together. I know you feel the same way. Kenya pulls her arm away and stands up, grabbing her clothes. She says, Amy, I like you. I like you a lot. You are an amazing person. You're nice and you're beautiful. And the sex has been amazing. But I don't love you. I thought we were just having fun. Amy, with an angry expression on her face, says, What do you mean you thought we were just having fun? You told me to not worry about Isaiah, Rose, or my father, and to care about my own happiness, and you are a part of that. Kenya says, Amy, the only reason I said that was because you said you didn't understand your feelings and you didn't know if you were into women or not, and was afraid to explore that because you were worrying about what your boyfriend, daughter, and father was going to think. I didn't mean to throw them all away. Amy then says, I broke up with Isaiah for you. I want you. I love you. Kenya then says, Amy, I'm sorry. I just don't see you that way. You are a very beautiful girl, and I know you can find someone that would treat you right and give you the respect you deserve. Amy just stares at her with tears in her eyes. Kenya grabs her hand and says, But I hope we can still be friends. Amy then pulls her hand away from her and says, Get out. Kenya says, Amy, please. Amy then screams at her, Get out. Kenya then grabs her stuff and puts her clothes on. She then starts to walk out of the house. At the door, she then turns to Amy and says, I'm sorry if I gave you the wrong impression. Amy doesn't say anything, just stares at her. Kenya says, Good luck. Amy then shut the door. Amy then goes back to her room and lays down and starts to cry for the rest of the day. Sits in her room soaking and wondering where she went wrong. Kenya calls and texts her all day, trying to apologize, but Amy doesn't want to hear any of it and just ignores her. The next day, Amy drives to her parents' house and picks up Rose. When they get home, Rose asks Amy, Where is Daddy? Amy then tells her what happened. Rose then asked Amy, So Daddy's never coming back? Amy then hugs her daughter and says, I don't know, sweetheart. I hope so. For the next few days, Amy tries to contact Isaiah, but he doesn't answer. The few times he did, it was only to talk about Rose, like how she is doing and when he could come see her and pick her up. When Isaiah came to pick up Rose, Amy begged and pleaded with him just to talk and to tell him that she made a mistake. He told her the only reason she feels that way is because Kenya didn't want to be with her. He said if Kenya would have said she loves her too, Amy wouldn't be acting this way. Isaiah told her that she doesn't love him and she doesn't want him back. He's just someone she feels like she can fall back on. But you can, Amy. You can't just break my heart like that, then think you could just come back into my life like nothing ever happened. Amy then said, "Please, Isaiah, give me another chance. I promise this will never happen again." Isaiah then responds, "I'm sorry, Amy. I just can't." Months go by, and Amy has moved out of her and Isaiah's old apartment. She moved into a smaller, less cozy apartment due to her not being able to keep up with the finances. She got a new job working as a waitress at her father's restaurant. She also started going to therapy, dealing with the loss of Isaiah and Kenya and figuring out her sexuality. Even though Amy isn't in the ideal situation, she's doing pretty good for herself. Isaiah still comes around from time to time to see Rose and to spend time with her. Over time, Isaiah and Amy started to talk just as friends again. It turned into them just going out sometimes, like to dinner or a movie. Then it turned into long walks in the park, to them sitting on the couch and cuddling, until eventually, Isaiah asked Amy if she wanted to get back together and try again. Amy was so happy and immediately said yes, and they gave each other a big hug and kiss. Then Rose, who they thought was asleep, said, "I knew you two would get back together." Isaiah and Amy laughed and pulled Rose in for a big hug.